They said I was unfit to handle my own money, that my stroke made me fragile, confused, an old woman better off signing her name away just until she got better. So I signed, because it was my goddaughter asking, because love wears a familiar face and betrayal often borrows it. Weeks later, I woke up in a nursing home bed, listening to the night cart roll past like a ghost, realizing my house, the one I'd built brick by brick through 31 years of teaching, might already have someone else's name on it. They thought I'd forgotten how to read fine print, but I taught half this city how to hold a pen. And before this story ends, that same pen will write a lesson no thief or notary will ever forget. The night staff calls it med pass, when they drift from door to door like soft-footed ghosts, pushing a rattling cart down the hall. In this place, the doors breathe, open with a keening beep, close with a mournful click, the rhythm of Peachtree Oak's rehabilitation and care. I hear that cart before I see it. The sleeping bodies rousing and turning, the gentle, practiced voices coaxing pills into mouths. I let Lila, the night nurse with the crescent moon smile and a tweed-colored bun, place the paper cup in my palm. All I do is look at her. That's all I have to do. She reads my eyes like a sentence, then turns to the window for the privacy of the blinds, and I don't swallow the little white disc. It slips under my tongue and waits while she raises the water, while her body shields the camera, while she speaks in that slow, honeyed drawl wishing me rest and sweet dreams. I've been swallowing other people's decisions for months. Tonight I decide the little white disc can dissolve into tissue instead of my blood. If you'd asked anyone in Atlanta 15 years ago what they remembered about Dr. Naomi Jefferson, they might have said she had a handshake like a contract in hallways that smelled like lemon cleanser and a gym that rattled on Friday nights when the marching band practiced. They might have said she worked a whistle better than most men worked a steering wheel. Might have said that she could look at your child and tell whether they'd eaten breakfast by the way they held their shoulders. I spent 31 years at Thomas Booker Middle, first as a math teacher with a drawer full of confiscated yo-yos, and then as principal with keys that jangled like a second heartbeat. I did not have a husband in that second half of my life, and I did not have children. I had a school. My goddaughter, Jade, came to me glittering and loud at 19, with hair like coiled rope and a smile that fit too easily into trouble. Her mother, Yolanda, my best friend since 7th grade when we shared a locker and a pair of cheap hoop earrings between us, died on a Thursday afternoon in a dialysis chair with a daytime judge show scolding in the background. I sat with the social worker on a folding chair that squeaked and claimed Jade as mine, the way a person claims the last unbroken thing in a house after a storm. Jade moved into my bungalow near Grant Park where I tended azaleas and old grants and older habits. I covered the second bedroom in quilts and books and rules. She teased me about the rules. I teased her about the black line on her eyeliner thick enough to draw roads. We had good years. She took a CNA job and decided she might go back to school for nursing. I taught her to make cornbread that didn't sulk in the middle and to set the table even when it was just us. On Sundays, she would clip my coupons, swearing the price of bacon was a sin in God's face. She started bringing home a young man, Evan Pierce, who sold houses and wore a watch that caught the light. He was polite and just the right amount of helpful, carrying groceries as if they weighed nothing, complimenting the Collards without making a show of it. I did what I always did with the young ones I loved. I opened the gate and pretended not to hold my breath when they wandered close to the edge of it. My stroke came not with thunder, but with an absurd little stutter, as I stood over a Sunday crossword. Saturday had been yard work, and my calves hummed with that satisfaction of labor. That means you've earned your sleep. Sunday morning sunlight found me at the kitchen table, coffee in a mug that read, "Principals do it with authority," filling little black boxes with 3-letter words for teachers know. I wrote NOD, and thought that was cute, and then my pen made a left when I told it right. The line the pen drew looked like a loose shoelace, nothing dramatic, except my right side wouldn't follow commands like a stubborn student. The coffee was warm, and then it was everywhere, a brown comet slashing across the newsprint and the table and my thighs, and I thought, how rude to spill yourself like that in your own kitchen. I don't much remember the ambulance. I remember Jade's voice, the way she pitched it high and bright like someone reading Bible verses loud enough for heaven to hear. I remember she held my hand too tight at the hospital, and I remember Evan's cologne inside his goodbye hug because he had to run. He had a showing. Auntie, you'll be all right. You're tough as tire rubber. And I remember a neurologist with square glasses saying something about right hemisphere and left-sided weakness, and the good news about speech. I spoke. My voice arrived through a space that felt smaller than it used to be, but it arrived, and I watched Jade's face relax at words that stumbled but kept going. I signed some forms in a spasm of beeps and nods and left my own house in the hands of other hands. They admitted me to Peachtree Oaks, rooms like hotel rooms from a budget franchise, all the same curtains, all the same art printed in a factory. People came and went with microwaved smiles and plastic lids. There was a bulletin board with events, a painting class that took too much patience, and bingo that took too little. Physical therapy began with a cheerful blonde woman tapping my thigh and saying, "Wake up, soldier," as if she were talking to a lazy muscle. I did what they said. That is one of my gifts. I do what is needed. I learned to walk without a cane over a week. I learned to lift without curses. I learned to reach without wanting to throw something when my hand trembled. Jade came every day the first week. She brought me magazines and pillow spray and that little pen like a flute. She read the patient rights brochure aloud and signed her name on every line that asked who could receive information, who could speak to doctors, who could pick up a prescription, who could authorize this or that. She called it a routine, durable power of attorney, a just-in-case paper. The words were dressed in friendly clothes, harmless and helpful like a neighbor offering to watch your cat. I had used the phrase durable power of attorney in a parent meeting once upon a time when a grandmother needed to sign something for her grandson. I remember thinking then that the word durable sounded so grown and steady. You could stand on durable. You could trust durable. Jade put the pen in my hand and said, "This is just paperwork so I can help you while you're resting. There's a trick your brain plays when you're tired and your face is tired and your body has betrayed you. The trick says a person who loves you and stands by your bed and pushes hair off your forehead would never push you off a cliff. It says you don't have to read the fine print because fine people brought it." I signed. She kissed my forehead. She told me she'd bring the lemon pound cake from that bakery I like off Decatur Street next time, if I was good, if I did my exercises, if I didn't stress. Evan stopped by in a hurry the second week with a bouquet that smelled like a department store. He stood in the doorway and clucked at me like a hen. "Strongest woman I know," he said, and his smile made a short stop at his eyes before it kept going to the nurse walking by. He had a folder, a glossy folder, and he let it slip into his messenger bag when I looked too close. The first sign that something was off was the silence. Jade didn't come 3 days in a row. The staff took me to the window bay where I could watch the crepe myrtles shake their pink hair at the passing traffic, but I turned my face from the trees and stared at the door. On the fourth day, a woman I did not know came to shave my legs. She called me Miss Naomi like she was spitting an olive pit. When she nicked my ankle and said sorry without looking up, I asked where Jade was, but she didn't lift her eyes from my shin. That evening, Jade arrived with takeout and a story about a patient at her job who'd fallen and needed stitches and paperwork, and her small apartment had flooded because of a burst pipe. There were reasons and reasons and reasons, and all of them were ordinary, and I swallowed them like I used to swallow cafeteria coffee, hot, thin, and full of aftertaste. I got home news from the housekeeping staff and some miracle breath left in a text message from my neighbor, Miss Eloise, who taught me to stake tomatoes. "Saw a white SUV in your drive 3 nights," she wrote. "Long after midnight. Thought you had company." I knew the shape of Jade's car. It was not an SUV. I asked Jade next morning who'd been at my house, and she looked offended, which is often the refuge of the guilty. "Auntie," she said, "I'm deep cleaning everything for when you get back. Evan's helping me. You don't want no dusty vents when your lungs are still in rehab." She said lungs like a gift she bought me on layaway. There is the moment you know and the moment you accept. Between the two is the dark room where you stand and feel the outlines of furniture, a couch you stub your shin on, a coffee table that whispers a bruise into your thigh. You can pretend the room is empty and keep moving. You can pretend you didn't stub anything, or you can stand still and let your eyes adjust. Mine adjusted at the desk in the therapist's office when she asked me to practice writing checks on photocopied paper. I wrote $127, 33 cents to Georgia Power, and signed the bottom with a neat N and J. I stared at the name line after my pen lifted, and I pictured a stack of checks moving through a bank with somebody else's handwriting pretending to be me. I do not know why that was the moment. Maybe it was the neatness of the photocopy. Maybe it was the therapist's bright, good job, as if I were learning to hold a crayon. Either way, something inside me stopped being polite. That night at MedPass, I tucked a sedative under my tongue and coughed it into the tissue when Lila turned to adjust the blinds. When she turned back, I handed her the cup and placed my hand over hers before she could leave. She has the kind of palm that announces a person, warm, competent, with the heel of it thickened by work. Her eyes flicked to the camera and back to me, and I moved my fingers once. If you've supervised a school for 3 decades, you can speak full paragraphs with your fingertips. She understood. She lifted the bed a little, so I was sitting more than lying, and she said, cheerful like the weather, "You need anything else, Miss Naomi?" And I said, "I need to stand up in my own name." Lists save lives. When I could think past my anger, I enumerated. 1, find out what exactly I signed. 2, find out what exactly they did with it. 3, stop the bleeding. 4, show my work. Lila visited on her lunch with a contraband cup of decent coffee and sat in the guest chair where hundreds of children sat before they told me why they punched somebody for looking at them a certain way. I told her everything. I told her about the paperwork and the 3-day silence and the night car in my driveway, and the thing inside my chest that went from worry to conviction like a train switching tracks. People do this every day, Lila said softly. We'd be full even without strokes or surgeries. Half our folks arrive by ambulance and leave by their front door. The other half leave by their nephew's plan. I kept my mouth shut because I did not want it to cry. I can't change what your kin do, she went on, but I can keep you awake for your own life. That pill is small and quick to melt, but you're quicker. I can show you how to keep your head clear. And Miss Naomi, don't sign nothing else in here unless I'm at your elbow. She slid a cheap track phone from her scrub pocket as casually as if she were handing me an extra napkin. This is my backup, she said, for when my boy forgets his. It ain't much, but it rings out and it records. Keep it turned off under your pillow. I'll bring you a charger and a case that looks like a Bible so nobody gets nosy. The second thing I needed was a lawyer. I had told families that for years, you need to speak to counsel when things got thorny at school. I'd never wanted to call one for myself. Pride is a noisy thing. I called anyway. The woman who answered at Lewis Elder Law had a voice like cool water. Bring what you have, she said. Don't wait. You've waited long enough. Lila arranged a van under the pretense of extra outpatient therapy. In the van, I wore my good church dress and carried my old leather handbag and the little phone skinned in fake pebbled leather that said Holy Bible in gold letters. Lewis Elder Law occupied a ground floor suite in a building with too much air conditioning and dried eucalyptus in tall vases. Attorney Amara Lewis greeted me herself. She wore red heels with a sensible heel, which is always a good sign in a woman who fights for a living. We sat at a round table. She asked precise questions and listened as if my answers were hooks on which the next question depended. When I finished telling her how Jade's pen entered my life and my house began to feel like a guest room with my name on the door, she took a breath like she would take a swim and said, Okay. First there are 2 kinds of power of attorney, springing and durable. Springing means it kicks in if and when you're incapacitated. Durable means it's ready right away and stays ready until you revoke it or die. Most hospitals and quick clinics print durable because it sounds helpful and because it moves things along. Second, if you were competent when you signed, you could grant it. If you are competent now, you can revoke it. Third, if she used it to sell or transfer property without your knowledge, there will be a recorded trail. Fourth, if there are signs of undue influence, financial exploitation, or isolation, we will speak to Adult Protective Services and the DA's Elder Abuse Unit, not just file a civil claim. I folded my hands. A bird singing in a bush outside sounded like a pencil tapping a desk. "You sound like a principal," I said. She smiled with one corner of her mouth. "Madam Principal, my mother taught in DeKalb County for 40 years. I don't cross a teacher unless I mean to lose." She printed a revocation and told me where to file, how to serve, what to expect after. She said words like injunctive relief and translated them into English that had sugar and muscle both. She did not ask me for a retainer because she said we would bill it to someone who wasn't me. "Whatever you're planning, Miss Jefferson," she said as she walked me to the door, "do it fast. People who start like this don't stop." When I got back to Peachtree Oaks, Jade was waiting. She had a new hair color that would have been pretty if I weren't so tired of the ways she tried to dazzle. "Hey, Auntie," she sang, "you look like you got a whole lot of fresh air today." "Just therapy," I said. "Where were you 3 nights ago?" She blinked like she'd just walked into the sun. "Working. Why?" "Miss Eloise saw a car. People park, Auntie. We live on a street with parking." She clapped her hands silently, like she was shaking off crumbs. "I got good news, though. I spoke to the mortgage company. We can refinance at a lower rate while your credit is still sunshine. I'm already a signer on the account, so it's nothing." Evan said, I said, and watched how she paused, how she moved her chin an inch to the side like she was measuring me. "My credit is mine, Jade." "You're still sick, Auntie." "I am recovering," I said. "I am not erased." She huffed, then smoothed it over with a laugh that sounded like it had been polished before she brought it. "You taught me to be proactive," she said. "Remember? Don't wait for trouble. Plan. I'm planning for you." There were other little things that week. A debit that I did not recognize on my checking account for $997. A notification from the county that my property tax mailing address had changed to a P.O. box I had never seen. The gardener I'd used for 20 years, a man named Mr. Roan, who cut hedges like hair trim, called the nursing station 4 times and hung up when they put him through because he didn't believe they were putting him through. He finally reached me at the dinner hour and whispered like the azaleas had ears. "Miss Jefferson, 2 folks came by your yard with a measuring wheel. They took pictures of your back steps and all the windows on the east side. They had a clipboard with Lanier Urban Holdings on it." "Lanier? Sounds like a lake, but it ain't water." I thanked him, the way you thank a person who tells you the snake you suspected is not a rope. The plate in front of me held chicken cut into squares, green beans the exact color of the plastic on the fork, and mashed potatoes that sighed when you pressed them. I pressed them. Lila slid a piece of paper under my napkin as she cleared my tray. It was a copy of The Power of Attorney. Seeing it made my hands remember the pen. I read the words like they were scripture that would decide my soul. Durable, immediate, financial and real property authority, broad discretion. She had what she needed, so I took back what I needed. I stopped the sedatives with Lila's help. I made my mind a whiteboard and erased fear with a tissue. I called Amara, who called the clerk's office and filed the revocation, who told me to post it on the front door in case anyone came sniffing with a deed. Lila drove me in her brother's pickup to a UPS store where a notary stamped the revocation with a rectangle that sounded like a knuckle on a door. We sent copies by certified mail to every bank and title company within a 40-mile radius. Then we sent them by regular mail, too, because the world respects a letter with a stamp that's been licked and blessed by the Postal Service. All that while, I smiled at Jade. I told her I wanted to make things easier for her. I told her I wanted to be generous. I told her I was grateful. She pursed her mouth like a person trying not to laugh and said whatever made me comfortable. Evan sent me articles about estate planning as if my eyes were new to words. "Probate is a monster," he wrote. "You should really get ahead of that. We can set you up to avoid the mess." The "we" made me want to throw his watch through a window. My plan had to be both soft and hard, soft enough that Jade wouldn't see it before it sat in her lap, hard enough that when it hit, it would leave a bruise even a bad man would see. I made recordings. I set the little phone on my lap and asked gentle questions that sounded like love. "Tell me again how the refinance works," I said, and explain to me why the county needs to mail our taxes somewhere new. She explained with the patience of a person fondling a prize. I said, "Do you think it's legal?" And she said, "It is if we're fast." The little phone made a quiet, satisfied whir as it ate her words. Sometimes Evan joined the calls, and I was quiet and let him be his own evidence. "Title companies don't care where the old lady is," he told Jade in a voice he didn't think I could hear. "They care that the line is signed. I can't keep a secret on my own. That's one thing age taught me. Another person's eyes are a mirror. You need to look at yourself there." I enlisted 3 mirrors: Lila, Attorney Lewis, and a man named Marcus Kane, who produces a local show where folks call when a mechanic holds their car hostage or a contractor disappears with their deposit. He used to be a student at my school, a skinny boy who fidgeted so much in church his grandmother threatened to tie his knees together with ribbon, and he grew up to be the kind of man who keeps promises back to front. I sent him a message in the middle of the night because middle of the night messages have a purity to them. Anybody answering at that hour either loves you or intends to. Marcus answered before the minute flipped. "I do elder abuse pieces with the DA sometimes," he said. "I've been wanting to show one from the inside." "You sure you want to be the inside?" "I've been the inside all my life," I said. "It's time somebody films it." "Can you handle the fallout?" "I raised 3,000 children," I said. And he laughed a short, admiring laugh that said he knew what that sentence meant. "Send me proof as you go," he said. "Time-stamped. Chain of custody matters. I'll be quiet until you tell me to speak loud." The trap required a meeting. A trap needs a place where prey believes they are safe enough to be careless. Jade's version of safe was paper. Her faith lived in signatures, notarials, witness lines, and gold seals. I told her I wanted to give her something while I could still sign smoothly. "I want to put your name on the house," I said, like a test I didn't want to grade. The silence on the line tasted like a smile. "It would give me peace," I said into the silence. After I got scared in the kitchen, I couldn't stop thinking about guarantees. I don't want to fight nobody in a will after I'm gone. If I write now, we'd be done. A quick deed, a clean gift. "Auntie," she breathed, "I knew you'd see this like a long-term thing. It's smart. You're smart. Evan can get a notary to come to the house tomorrow. He knows a mobile guy." "I'd rather meet at my house," I said, before she could choose a room that belonged to her. "I'm more myself there." "You want to go home?" she asked, suspicious. Cunning never sleeps, but I kept my voice small and sweet like tea cake crumbs. "Just for an hour," I said, "with my therapist. They said it helps to be in familiar spaces so my brain remembers where it belongs." She turned that over in her mouth. "Okay," she said at last. "Tomorrow at 11. When we pulled up next morning, the lawn wore a haircut so close it looked like a military recruit. The azaleas had been trimmed bluntly. The maxed out sticker that someone had plastered on the utility pole had peeled at the edges. My porch sat in its same place, the bench with its same long sigh, and still I felt like I had walked into a room staged for a showing. Lila parked across the street and put a hand on my arm as I got out, not because she doubted my legs, but because none of this was about muscles. Inside, the air smelled wrong. There is the wrong that comes from dust and neglect. That's a different wrong. This wrong smelled like expensive lemon cleaner spilled on mud. New towels with tags still on them hung in the bathroom. My photographs had been shifted half an inch. On the kitchen counter sat a gift basket full of crackers and jam and ribbon. A note tucked under cellophane. "Welcome home, Miss Jefferson." The writing wasn't Jade's. It curled like a snake in a storybook. Jade arrived in a dress that said she'd watched videos about elevated casual. Evan came with a leather folder and a notary named Victor, who looked like he loaned money to people in hallways. When Victor glanced at my hands, I made sure they were still for him. I could be a statue when it mattered. Lila sat on the sofa with a clipboard, and I thought about all the times she'd offered clipboards to families in the hallway outside a hospital room. I want it simple, I said, when everyone had found their place. I give my house to my goddaughter out of gratitude and love. No tricks. No liens, Evan said, and crossed his legs like a man pleased with the furniture. We drafted a quitclaim deed. It's straightforward. Show me, I said. And he slid it across my table like the Grail. I read it. I read slowly, the way I ask children to read when what they want most is to get to the end. The words did what words do when they think you are not watching. They tried to hide the edges. I found them and felt their teeth. Transfer now, no consideration, no life estate reserved, immediate recording. He had done this before. How many women like me sat at tables like this and swallowed documents because someone they loved shook the bottle beforehand and said it would go down smooth? I smiled and reached into my bag. I have something too, I said in the same voice I used when I returned confiscated yo-yos to boys who'd earned them back. A personal letter of intent. Attorney Lewis asked me to write it. Evan's mouth pinched when I said attorney. Jade mouthed an obscenity where she thought video wouldn't catch it. What kind of letter? Evan said. A letter clarifying my wishes so no one can twist anything, I said, and held up 2 stapled pages with my name at the top in bold. It looked legal. It looked like a letter. It had been drafted by Attorney Lewis in her office while we ate leftover pizza and drank something bitter and honest. It would not pass title or anything else. It would pass judgment. It would make a record. It would prove who said what in this house. Before I sign anything, I said softly, I want to read this aloud, just so everybody in the room is clear on my intentions. Jade opened her mouth, but Lila spoke first, voice quiet and peppered with official. That's a reasonable step, Miss Jefferson. As your therapist on this home evaluation, I encourage you to walk through your understanding of what you are signing. Victor the notary shrugged. Notaries care about identification and signatures. They care about convincing you're you. Oh, he didn't care what my mouth said as long as the ink said my name. Evan glanced at Jade, then settled himself as if this too was a formality he could endure. I began to read. My voice shrank and swelled. I said the house was my sanctuary and I had lived there well. I said my goddaughter had been my daughter in every way that matters until very recently. I said I did not intend to transfer my home to anyone at this time. I said anyone who attempted to transfer my home with power of attorney papers in their hand would be doing so against my wishes, and I would consider it an exploitation. I said I had revoked any powers previously granted. I said my head was clear. Evan's foot stopped tapping. Jade's face tightened until it looked like a mask her skin borrowed. Victor looked from one to the other and then at me, trying to find the weather. Okay, Evan said, but our deed here is the transfer. You don't need a letter if you're actually giving the house. We signed a mobile POA for smoothness. We can show it to the notary. Victor, I said, before we do any of that, I want to be very clear that this is a voluntary act. No duress, no trickery. I turned the page. I also want it to be clear that earlier this month, my goddaughter and her fiancé referred to me as the old lady on a call at 11:23 p.m. and discussed whether I would notice if my mail was redirected. I looked up and watched Evan's second eyelid close. I want to state that I have been medicated with sedatives in this facility that I did not consent to, and I withheld them in order to be here today. Lila coughed into her fist. I want to say I have contacted Adult Protective Services and the Fulton County District Attorney's Elder Abuse Unit. Evan stood. The leather folder under his arm, the smile on his mouth brittle as sugar glass. If that's how you feel, Miss Jefferson, perhaps we should reschedule. Perhaps you should sit, said a different voice. My living room had 3 cameras operating before they arrived, a ring in the window disguised with a lace curtain, a baby monitor I borrowed from the woman down the block who had newborn twins and owed me for bringing her casseroles, and the little Bible phone Lila had propped against a wooden angel on the mantel. Those were my eyes. Every one of those cameras had already uploaded its stomach full of images and sound to a cloud account Marcus controlled. He had been texting me with the kind of punctuation that looks like teeth. He did not ask for permission to come in. He had it, stamped in a text message with the word now. Marcus pushed open the screen door and walked in the way anyone who grew up here walks into a house when their auntie calls. Behind him came a woman with a badge on a chain that she put away as soon as she saw me steady and sitting upright. On her left stood a man with a gentle face who carried a laptop. They did not need to huff or puff to make my house their own. Truth walks different. It occupies. It wears the furniture like a habit. Jade stood with her hand to her chest and said, "Auntie, who are these people?" "Friends," I said. "The kind who show up when you call late." "We're filming a piece on elder financial exploitation," Marcus said, as if he were offering peanuts at the ballpark. This story sounded like the kind where the ending can be changed in the middle if everybody pays attention. He lifted the skirt of his shirt and produced a folded paper with his station's letterhead. "We're public," he said to Victor, who had begun to look for his bag. "Nothing off the record. Unless Miss Jefferson asks us to leave, we're staying." The woman with the badge nodded once at me. "My name is Investigator Alvarez," she said in a voice that would have worked well on my 8th graders. "Miss Jefferson asked our unit to keep an eye on a document situation. I'm here in case any document tries to do more than it is allowed to." Jade turned to me with something that looked almost like a plea. "Auntie, this is crazy. We came here because you wanted to give me the house." "I wanted to see if you would take it, Jade," I said softly. "That's different." Evan puffed air from his nose and said something about ambushes in television and how inappropriate it was to introduce law enforcement into a family matter. Marcus laughed once in the back of his throat. "Family matters are where most of the news lives," he said. "Here's my letter," I said, and handed a copy to Investigator Alvarez. "Here's my revoked power of attorney," I said, and handed a copy to Victor. "Here's the certified mailing receipt," I said, and handed it to Evan. He took all the papers like they were not words but insects. He straightened the stack that didn't need straightening. "Miss Jefferson," Investigator Alvarez said kindly, "do you feel safe with these folks in your home right now?" "I feel safe," I said. And then I made my voice large enough for the baby monitor in the corner and the ring behind the lace and the little phone in the Bible case. "But I feel safer because you're here." Jade shifted from foot to foot. "Auntie," she said in a quieter voice, "I did not mean to hurt you. I was trying to protect what you've built, that's all. I always protected you. I stayed with you after Mama died. I turned down trips. I drove you to appointments. I gave up things. You think that was easy? You think cutting coupons is a sacrifice?" I said with a gentleness that surprised me. "You think leaving a party early makes you a savior? Your mother used to walk 3 miles to the bus to our school because we didn't have gas money. I watched her get up at 4 and go to bed at midnight because the laundry wouldn't finish itself. Protecting me would have looked like keeping my mail in my box and my money in my account and my name on my door." Evan put his palms up like a man pacifying a dog. "We can go," he told Jade. "They're not in a signing mood." "Sit," I said, and my voice carried enough school in it that he sat. I reached into my weathered handbag and took out the last thing I'd brought, an old spiral notebook from my desk at Thomas Booker Middle. On the cover, in black marker and all caps, I had written, "Show your work." I smiled at Investigator Alvarez because this was the moment I had made myself for. I pulled from the notebook its guts, printed bank statements circled in red where the debit went to a store 2 counties away. I'd never shopped. A printout from the clerk's website showing a recorded power of attorney with my shaky signature and Jade's bright one. Screenshots of a voicemail where Evan left a message for a buyer at Lanier Urban Holdings saying, "We can close cash if you don't ask too many questions," and a copy of my revocation stamped "Received" in a box that made me want to kiss a clerk. Lila handed her little therapist clipboard to Investigator Alvarez, who began to write in tidy lines. "I did not do this," Jade said, looking at the bank statement like it was a foreign alphabet. "Evan used my card to pick up a rug and groceries. That was for the house." "I don't eat $300 of groceries from a warehouse store, child," I said. "I have eaten the same breakfast for 19 years. "Miss Jefferson," Marcus said, "the cameras recorded her saying she redirected your mail, too. His voice had changed. It held the steel he saved for people who drove off with somebody's money and called it Tuesday. I redirected it, Jade said after the smallest pause, to make it easier to pay your bills. By removing the bills from my house, I said. To protect your identity, she shot back, eyes bright and pleased she had thought of a pretty phrase. From who? I asked. From me? Nobody spoke for a long breath. Victor, Investigator Alvarez said in that same gentle 8th grade teacher voice, were you aware the principal revoked the power you are relying on? Victor raised his palms like a man caught with the wrong hymn book. He said he was not a lawyer. He said he certified signatures. He said he did not want any trouble. Then you should leave, she said. This is quickly becoming trouble. He moved to the door like a man who understood that the room had changed shape and he should get his body out before the new shape remembered him. Evan stood at the same time, trying to look elegant while hurrying. He warned me with a smile I'd seen on boys who hadn't done their homework. You'll regret this, he said, because threats are the only music some men know. Regret moved out of my house yesterday, I said. Jade did not move. She looked at me as if I were somebody's porch light she had always relied on to be on. Without the promise of my light, she wasn't sure where the stairs were. You raised me, she said. Don't turn on me in front of strangers. I taught you, I said. And one of the lessons was what to do when a stranger knocks on your door and tries to sell you your own house. Evan told me it was smart, she whispered. He told me you'd be grateful after we saved it. He told me there were buyers now who'd take the whole block and put something beautiful there instead of old porches. She laughed once the way a hurt dog shows a tooth. He said people like you get attached to things that sag. I thought of the back steps. They do sag. They do. So do cheeks, shoulders, curtains, syllables, promises. So do we. The trick is to hold ourselves up anyway and call the sag what it is. Evidence of use. Proof you were needed. You chose Evan over me, I said. That is your right. You are 31. You can choose poor as easily as good for yourself. But when you make your poor choice, you do it with your money and your house and your name. You don't stand in my living room and practice on me. She sat and cried the way girls cry when they have been caught, and the thing they have been caught in isn't a lie, but a truth that no longer fits. Lila went to the kitchen and did what women do when another woman cries in a house where a man is still learning how. She made tea that no one would drink. Marcus recorded. Investigator Alvarez made a phone call that people in rooms like mine hope to make and hope to never have to. When the detective from the DA's office arrived with a suit that needed pressing and a legal pad that didn't, Evan was gone. The detective did not chase him. He took my evidence and Jade's name and promised with his eyes. He asked me whether I'd consent to a temporary protective order so Jade could not sign anything on my behalf, and whether I'd come to a hearing on Thursday morning in probate court. I said yes to everything, because I meant to be the kind of old woman who shows up for her own life. The detective nodded at my notebook and said, "Most folks don't bring the paper that saves them." I nodded back and thought of all the boys I'd told to keep their math work neat, and how none of us know which habits will save us later. After they left, Jade hovered on my porch, the same porch where she once painted her nails neon and told me who kissed who behind the gym in 11th grade, the same porch where I once bandaged a scraped knee and talked her out of getting a tattoo on the back of her neck because chewing on a bad idea can be worse than swallowing it, leaves your whole mouth sore. She looked smaller there. Not because she was small, but because the porch had reclaimed the size it had when she was young enough to sit in my lap. "You ruined my life," she hissed. But it sounded like a child caught slinging rocks in the alley. "No," I said. "You are still very capable of ruining it on your own. You do not need my help. You never did." The hearing in probate court felt like every school board meeting I ever attended. A room full of chairs with people in them pretending to be comfortable. A dais where somebody tries to be wise in public, a clock we all ignore until we can't. Attorney Lewis sat beside me with red shoes on and paper-like armor. Jade sat on the other side of the room with a legal aid lawyer who looked young enough to be one of my former 8th graders. Evan did not come. The judge wore her hair natural and her mouth firm. We are here because a revocation was filed and a durable power of attorney appears to have been used in ways the principal did not intend, she said, sounding tired, not with us, but with the parade of cousins and stepchildren and boyfriends that had preceded us. She listened with her whole face when I spoke. I spoke slowly and my mouth did not betray me. I told her about the pen and the papers and the night sedatives and the mailbox and the measuring wheel on my lawn. I told her about the audio of my loved ones planning my invisibility. Attorney Lewis played the recording, and there it was. My goddaughter laughing that laugh. Evan saying, "Old lady," the two of them turning my name into a plan. Jade spoke too. She said she loved me and had always loved me and would always love me, but love sometimes looks like hard decisions. The judge's eyebrow lifted. "Hard decisions are for your own house," the judge said, "not for someone else's." She ordered the protective order. She ordered the clerk to flag my parcel so no deed could be recorded without her signature, in person, on a camera, with two witnesses who were not related to anyone in the room. She referred the rest to the DA with a look that said she would not mind if this line of cars continued down the street until someone wrote tickets. After, in the hallway, Marcus put his camera away and just stood with me like a man who knows holding a person upright isn't about arms. "This will air," he said, "but not with your face unless you want it. We'll call you Miss J and we'll blur your porch." "Blur the porch," I said. "I'm keeping it for myself." He smiled. "You could have been my principal," he said. "I'm still everyone's principal I ever had," I said. "That is the burden and blessing of this job." The case moved like all cases. Slow and exactly as fast as people with keys can make it. Evan posted a picture from Miami less than a week later with a caption about catching flights, not feelings, and I made a little noise at the back of my throat that surprised even me. He did not return Marcus's calls. He did not answer Investigator Alvarez. He did not come to the grand jury room where they discussed whether deception can be a crime when the person smiling at you is related to your heart. Jade, though, came by the house. She came mid-afternoon when she knew Lila would be on shift and the front room light would hit the dust the way it used to when we did our nails on Saturdays. She wore no eyeliner. She wore a sweatshirt with a stain. She looked like a person whose reflection had stopped being interesting to her. She stood on the porch and practiced a speech and then forgot it when I opened the door before she knocked. "I don't want to go to jail," she said, the way a child states a fact about rain. "Evan said they don't really put people like me in jail. He said the way you're doing it is cruel." I let the screen door rest against my hip. "Cruel is a word people use when consequences introduce themselves," I said. "I am not the one who invited consequences to this porch. You are." "If I plead guilty," she whispered, looking down at the steps she once took two at a time, "they'll put it on my record. I'll lose my job. I won't be able to work with patients. I'll lose everything." "You won everything," I said, "until you decided to change the rules mid-game." She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I thought I could be you, strong, in charge. I thought if I made the money move the way Evan said, I could control life instead of waiting for life to control us." "You're not me," I said and made my voice soft. "You're you. That should be enough." She started to speak, but I held up a hand. "And if it isn't enough for the men you choose different men." Tears slid down her face like two stubborn children who didn't want to go to bed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I am. I know you don't believe me, but I am." "I believe you," I said. "I don't trust you. Those are different verbs." When she left, she took the steps one by one, careful, like an old woman. It stung my heart. The way we become what we pretend before we've earned it. The DA called to say the grand jury recommended charges against Evan for fraudulent practices in real estate and against Jade for financial exploitation of an elder. Attorney Lewis told me we could pursue civil damages too, for the withdrawals and the time my house spent under threat. I said okay. Then I made tea and sat in the living room and thanked the couch for its work and the ceiling fan for its "I was here" and the porch for holding all those feet without complaint. Lila came by after her shift with ginger cookies and fell asleep sitting up, her head back and mouth open, and I put a blanket over her and felt that old sweetness that comes when you do a small kindness for someone who has been doing large ones for you. I thought that would be the end of it, but the end of it, like most ends, had a tail. A month later, I got a letter hand-addressed in a script that looked forced. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper torn from a notebook. "I'm leaving Atlanta," it said in Jade's particular punctuation, which involved an indifferent relationship to commas. "I can't go nowhere without people knowing what I did. I can't do the job I picked. People Google you. I think I'll go to my cousin in Charlotte and start over working at a salon. Hair still makes sense to me even when people don't. I know you hated Evan, but I loved him, and love is stupid like that. He left me anyway. He's good at leaving." There was a smear at the bottom where a tear had tried to do too much. "I know what I took from you was not money. You loved me like I belonged to you. And I gave that love to somebody who took it to Miami. I think that's the part I need to pay back. You don't have to write me. I know I messed the bridge. I know you won't chase me. I guess I wanted you to know I was going. Jeb." I held the letter the way you hold a hand that won't hold you back. I did not write her. I did not call. I did not post a Facebook message about forgiveness or grace or any of the other beautiful words people pull out when a wound is too fresh to touch. I put the letter in my notebook where I keep my math and my deeds and my receipts. I wrote in block letters at the top of the page where it rested. Lessons. Some are math, some are people. What do you do with the rest of your life when you realize how quickly the life you built can be moved by somebody who claims to love you? Some folks put locks on everything and sit with their hands in their lap. Some build fences out of fear and then discover fear has gates you do not control. I took a different route. I went back to a classroom. Not the same classroom. I am too old for middle school hallways and their particular perfume of sweat and flavored chips. I went to the basement at Mount Zion Baptist where the Wednesday night Bible study used to be, and where the folding chairs now gather dust like a polite congregation. I told Pastor Ruth what I wanted to do, and she clapped her hands exactly once. "Finally," she said, like we had been speaking about this for years. We hung a banner that said "Show Your Work Senior Academy," and we served coffee that was actually decent, and we brought in free notaries and a lawyer who owed me 3 favors and a banker who owed the church 2. Lila taught a unit on reading your pill bottle and keeping records of who puts what in your mouth. Marcus taught a unit on cameras and how to point them, because the only time a camera should fail a person is when they don't want to be seen. Attorney Lewis came one Thursday and spoke about powers and papers and what durable actually means, and she said it with the swagger of a person who has dragged men by their ankles out of other people's living rooms. I had my notebook and my pen and my voice and a copy of my revocation enlarged to poster size. We read it aloud together like scripture. The first night, just 12 people came. The second night, 28. The third, a man in a ball cap stood in the doorway and cried the way a grown man cries when he's embarrassed, quiet and from the side of his face. And he told me his daughter had switched his address and he had not noticed because he trusted her and because his eyes were bad. He called me teacher, and I took his chin in my hand and told him to open to the page where the bank statement hid like a small animal and to underline the part that proved he was still the star of his own life. Marcus aired my story the week after we started the class. He blurred my porch and called me Miss J like we agreed. The comments on the station website were what you expect. Half "I can't believe a child would do that." Half "I can believe it, we've been seeing the same on our block." Letters came to the church in wobbly hands. "Thank you for saying it plain," one read. "Every time I try to tell my granddaughter to stop speaking to me like I'm stupid, she tells me I am." People brought pies because that is how our people say God bless you. And also here is something sweet when you have tasted all that is bitter. One woman brought a plant that looked dead but wasn't, not really. I watered it and set it by the window anyway. There was a different letter too, in a different envelope. It had a law firm's name at the top and words apologizing for Mr. Pierce's inability to return messages. It said Mr. Pierce regretted any distress caused, but believed everyone had acted within the bounds of love and law. It offered a settlement. It offered to make me whole. I laughed at that, as if you could restore a leg with a check. Attorney Lewis laughed too, and wrote back in a tone of voice that makes men stop clipping their nails during calls. I received another letter 2 weeks later with more money and less arrogance. I took it. Not because money equalized anything, but because it was mine and had been taken. With it, I replaced the back steps, and I did not allow smooth builder lines. I asked Mr. Rohn to make sure they kept a small sag, just enough to remember. Do I miss Jade? Yes, I miss the version of her that sat on my porch and believed the sky would do as she asked it. I miss the night we laughed so hard at a joke on TV that we both woke up the cat. I miss the way she shouted when the pastor hit the one real note in a sermon full of froth. I miss the part of my life when loving her felt like a rising, but I do not miss the worry that came like a shadow around the corner at 11 o'clock, the notary's rectangle stamped on my kitchen table like a bruise, the small voice that asked whether I should prove myself all over again to someone who learned me at our own table. I have a rule at Senior Academy. I write it every week on the whiteboard, and then I make everyone write it too, like homework. The rule is this: trust is not a signature. Trust is a habit. I say it slow and let them borrow it and carry it and write it on the inside of their mouths. A woman named Queen said last week, "I thought trust was love." I told her love is an engine and trust is oil. Without oil, the engine burns out. With the wrong oil, it sputters and shudders and makes noises you pretend you don't hear until you are on the side of the road. The right oil, the habit kind, keeps you moving long past when folks expect you to stall. Last Sunday after church, a girl about 12 stood at the edge of the parking lot while the grown folks did what grown folks do: hug too long, gossip too much, make excuses for why they can't bring casseroles and then bring them anyway. She had a notebook clutched to her chest. "You really a principal?" she asked me. "I really was," I said. "You still seem like one," she said, and she wasn't teasing. "What makes you say that?" "You stand like you could tell people to sit down," she said. "Well," I told her, "I can." "What's in your notebook?" she asked, because children know when something is important. "My work," I said, "old and new, also letters, also recipes." "You put recipes with math?" she asked, scandalized. "Everything belongs together," I said. "You just have to label it right." She looked like she wanted to ask a different question, and I waited the way I wait for a word to come back after a stroke. "My grandma won't write stuff down," she said finally. "She says if she writes it, somebody will find it. She keeps everything in her head." "That's a heavy place to store it," I said. "Tell her to come on Wednesday night. We'll make her a folder." She nodded solemnly as if I had given her a secret mission. Then she ran off to whoever brought her, and I stood there and watched the sky do its slow-breathing thing and thanked it for not collapsing even when people made a mess of the ground. Tonight, Lila will sit in my living room and eat a slice of pound cake that is too sweet. And I will let it be too sweet, because sweetness is not the enemy. Marcus will send a text that says, "Ratings were good. People are watching." Attorney Lewis will send an email that says, "Pierce pled out to the lesser charge, restitution paid, probation. He has to teach a class about the law he broke." I will picture him in a room explaining to men like him that a woman like me is not a mark but a map, and if you don't read the legend right, you end up in a swamp. And I will open my notebook and write the next lesson plan. Durable power of attorney is a tool. In the wrong hands, a weapon. In the right hands, a rope to pull you back up. Choose the hands. I will write the names of the seniors who will be there and the pie assignments and a note reminding me to bring extra pens, because I will loan mine and forget who took them, and that will make me cranky. I will write, at the top of the page, like always, "Show your work." I have a new rule for myself that I do not write on the board because it is not theirs. It is mine. I do not answer to fear. Fear has the energy of a toddler with a marker. It will draw on your walls and your mind and your checkbook if you let it. But if you give it a corner and a scrap of paper and keep your body moving in the direction you promised, fear tires. It takes a nap. You take your marker back. People love to ask me if I forgave Jade. Forgiveness is a word we throw like confetti because it makes us feel like a party took place. I don't know if I forgave her. I do know I stopped giving her access to rooms where I sleep and mail where I live and names that belong to me. I do know I hope she uses that hair salon chair for more than gossip, that she uses her hands for the gentle work they were made to do. I do know I will not write her back until the apology she wrote to me turns into the kind of apology that builds a different day. That may never happen. I will not sit in a window hoping to see it. They said I was unfit to handle my own money. They were wrong. I was unfit to handle other people's excuses, and I fixed that. Before Lila leaves tonight, she will take back her little Bible phone. I will press it into her palm like a thank you wrapped in pleather. Keep it, she'll say, and I'll shake my head because I have a better one now. My new phone's case is purple and says nothing on the outside and everything on the inside. Numbers for people who answer. After she goes, I'll lock the door with a deadbolt that makes a noise I have come to love. I'll walk down to the back steps and sit a spell, feeling the slight sag under my thighs, the way you feel the dip where somebody dear slept for years. I'll wipe away a single bead of water where the evening settled, and I'll think how that's what life is at this age. Wipe and settle, and then settle some more. If Jade ever finds her way back, there will be a chair on the porch because there is always a chair. I will let her sit, and I will let her speak, and I will listen the way I listen to 8th graders who think they invented heartbreak. If she tells me she is building a life that does not depend on other people's doors opening for her, I will nod and pour tea. If she asks me to co-sign a thing, I will send her to class on Wednesday night and sit in the back while Attorney Lewis says, yet again, that durable does not mean endless and power does not mean yours. And if she says nothing but thank you, I will accept it. I am not unkind. I am simply finished pretending that to be kind is to leave my name lying around where anybody can pick it up. I keep it here, inside these 4 bones and between these thin lips and inside this steadying heart. It is durable. It is immediate. It is broad and not transferable. It is mine.